Hello everyone and welcome to the 2025 Volume 2 Lionel Catalog Review. We've been waiting for this for a while. It's been a few weeks a little bit later when compared to previous years, but it's finally here and just in time and ready for a review. I'm your host PensyFan19 and we'll be taking a look at this year's catalog, the second of two Lionel O-Gauge catalogs that are released during the year. I'm not sure why they held it off for a few weeks, I guess, but at least it's here now. I do apologize if some of my sentences might not make a little sense. It is currently 4 in the morning at the time of recording this because now that I've started a job, it's just a matter of legitimately not having a lot of time to review stuff like this. But that's another thing I should really explain quickly. I do apologize for the severe lack of actual uploads other than occasional rail fading shorts and catches. It's just that I've been busy with a matter of graduating, family events, house renovations, and even a Weird Al Yankovic concert thrown into the mix. But just know that I'm back. I do have a lot of ideas for larger videos set in mind, but it's just a matter of trying to choose which one to work on first. I have various ideas, each of them involve their own amount of research, so still something that I'm trying to choose what I should focus on first. And also, this video is kind of the reason as to why I haven't really done anything else as of now, because I didn't want to put all this time and effort in a video only for its viewership to be hoodwinked by the annual review of the Volume 2 catalog. So I was kind of waiting for this to come out so I can review it and then work on a larger project, so this way one of those two videos doesn't hoodwink each other when it comes to views. But now that that is out of the way, we have a very unusual circumstance with this catalog in which instead of opening in the regular Lionel Catalog browser, it's just opened as a single PDF. So we'll be scrolling through instead of clicking pages. I'm not sure why they're doing this instead of putting it on their, default website, but yeah, I don't really have an answer to that. Again, I apologize if some of my sentences might not make sense. It is currently 4 o'clock in the morning on the nose, but other than that, the cover looks like we have a F unit on the bottom, which is a little bit of a good sign for me, because I was predicting that since we got the 700E Hudson as a primary engine of focus for the Volume 1 2025 catalog to celebrate Lionel's 125th anniversary, hopefully we can do the F unit next, because that is the next most iconic engine produced by Lionel, one steam and one diesel. And it looks like we already have an F unit on the bottom right. I mean, I'm not sure if it's entirely accurate to what Lionel has, but it's a start. So we'll just see what Lionel has to offer in regards to, the livery variations, if they're doing an F3, or what model they'll be using. Because with each of these catalogs, even with Volume 2, which is historically the smaller of the two, they still introduce at least one new tooling per catalog that they put all the emphasis on with different liveries and a lot of detail. So with all that out of the way, let's get the long-awaited catalog into the review. Starting off with the table of contents, and enter to win a Lionel flag that flew over the headquarters. That's a nice little raffle that they have going on. This is another thing too with the Volume 2. I don't remember if last year's Volume 2 catalog was this short. I mean, it says 40 pages, but it looks a lot shorter that it says 2 of 23 up here. But we'll just see how it plays out. And starting off, we have the F unit. Glad to see that I was right. Starting off with the Santa Fe Super Chief with not just your typical A unit, but also the A and B unit. This time only showing the front and the B unit. There might be a few more cars on the next page. As always, if you want more details regarding the description and the details, feel free to pause the video. Yep, here are the rest of the cars. So it looks like we have two B units in the middle instead of the usual one. Now it's understandable why Lionel will be covering this set. It's pretty much the Lionel set of all time. 9 times out of 10, if you were to think of a post-war Lionel train that wasn't a steam engine, it would be one of the Santa Fe F units. And I believe I remember hearing that, I think because of the variation of engines that Lionel purchased, or at least designed, for the Santa Fe. They indirectly inspired the Santa Fe to purchase the F3 itself, or the F7, one of those two. Maybe either in its silver livery or in its midnight black livery. I think Lionel released I think it was called the Night Bonnet scheme, where this was black instead of silver, on a Santa Fe F3 first, and that ultimately inspired Santa Fe to purchase F3s, if I remember correctly. Or at least I remember hearing that kind of story. But anyways, in a somewhat unusual occasion, instead of showing the whole set at once, they're splitting it up into multiple lines, I guess. I say it's unusual because they split up the engine into the model itself, which looks like it's already complete and very well made, might I say. And then they just have the coaches underneath the engine instead of, I guess, having them all as one continuous set. It seems like more like an individual engine and individual cars instead of one whole set that we would usually have towards the beginning of a catalog like this. But still good nevertheless. The details on the coach look pretty good. So, going up next, we have some more F units. This time in Santa Fe's other well-known livery. I believe this is the one used on some of the FTs, namely the blue and yellow one, the blue, yellow bonnet, I want to say. And after that, we also have some Lackawanna F units, as well as Atlantic Coastline and Minneapolis and St. Louis. Very interesting choices with these two, especially since they're lesser known liveries. I was going back and forth with a friend of mine as to whether Lionel's going to do, if they were to choose the F3s, which thankfully they did, if they were going to do liveries from former post-war F3s or lesser known liveries of F3s in general. And I'm glad to see that they went with the latter, because this way they're giving recognition to lesser known variants of paint schemes that were on a more iconic engine. With the exception of Santa Fe and Lackawanna, I'm not sure if there's a lot of merch of these two particular liveries, especially black and yellow for Atlantic Coastline. So, yeah. Again, I'm really sorry if I'm struggling with stuff to come up with. It is 4:05 a.m., but hopefully this review won't be too long given the short page range. Alright, hey, we got a post-war livery down here. So that's a nice combo of some real-life liveries and also one former livery. I was talking about this exact livery, the 2242, which I think is a combination of a handful of New Haven Railway paint schemes, namely for something like the Roger Williams, the John Quincy Adams. I don't think they had a silver front, but this was a somewhat iconic Lionel F unit. I think it was a little more on the rare side, but frequent enough where people would recognize it as a Lionel post-war engine. So we have that left over on the left. I think that's still a rendering of it based on, yeah, I guess it looks like the same. For some reason, I think it's the shades of gray and black that make it look like it was taken straight out of the 1957 catalog. Like there's some sort of extra layer to it in which it looks more like it's from a post-war magazine versus a Lionel digital catalog. So maybe that just has something to do with the resolution of this livery, but it's just something that I find interesting. And then on the other side, we have two Lionel Lines SD40-2, SD38s. Interesting. I'm really surprised they went with, I guess, a lesser used SD model instead of the SD40-2. Maybe there's some different tooling or some different specifications when compared to other SD40-2s that Lionel released in previous years. But I prefer the 2026 on the bottom, I guess. This is a nice livery. It's pretty simple, orange and blue. But I think they did a good job with this bicentennial unit down here, too. It reminds me of something like the Preamble Express and several other bicentennial units from 1976, especially seeing that the U.S. will be celebrating our 250th anniversary by next year. So nice to see that Lionel celebrating that occasion a little bit early, too. And then going back to F units from SD38s, we have the North Coast Limited from the Northern Pacific. This is what I usually talk about when we have a set in the catalog where you have the locomotives hauling the set and you have all the coaches in more or less one line plus a description. I guess the Santa Fe F units need no introduction, but it's nice to see that Lionel is covering this line. I feel like there might have already been a North Coast Limited set sometime in the past. You could probably correct me in the comments if you want to. But once again, Lionel did a fantastic job, doing a great job on the livery, especially the B unit with the extended levering, and then all the coaches themselves. I feel like it's a little bit more of the underrated passenger trains that were led by F units, especially seeing how this is one of a few, dare I say, if not the only instance of, I guess, the passenger train having the only different livery than the standard livery for the railroad. Because I think the only coaches and engines on the Northern Pacific Railway to be given this very good looking two-tone green was for the North Coast Limited. All their freight engines were in yellow and black and red. So, I mean, granted, there might have been other passenger services that used non-standard liveries, such as Illinois Central, City of Miami, that we saw in last year's catalog, but this one in particular kind of stands out to me, especially seeing how relatively small-ish, or at least, yeah, somewhat small-ish the rest of the Northern Pacific is, where it's only one main line and a bunch of branch lines. Now we move on to the SD50s. Trying to remember if Lionel covered these lately, but if they did, we got some more liveries for them, this time including Chicago Northwestern, YN1 for CSX, this time with both the logo towards the top and bottom of the short hood. I think the top one over here has a center headlight. I believe it goes back to Louisville and Nashville origins, if I remember correctly. Or at least Seaboard Coastline. No, Seaboard System at the time of CSX YM1. Then we also have Hudson Bay Railway, representing the times where these SD50s were converted into SD40Es, I think the designation was. Same thing with Lake State Railway over here, as well as Union Pacific and Kansas City Southern. Along with this triangle livery back here. Oh, it's an Operation Lifesaver unit, I think, when this eventually loads. If it does, seeing that this is a PDF. But once again, good job on Lionel highlighting little used or I guess one-off liveries in addition to everything else that they have on the roster. This is also some nice history with these two down here to show how even if the SC50 was initially a commercial failure, some railroads still found ways to convert them and keep them running up until this very day. Then we go back to the SD38s, this time including Cargill, which I believe is a short line railway up in Canada that works on a few grain plants, if I remember correctly. I remember seeing a few photos of it working at these remote plants on our picture archives. And then down here we have Conrail, pretty iconic. Next we have Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton, EJ&E, and McLeod River Legacy. I'm not sure where this particular railroad ran. Kind of looks like the Burlington route livery, so that's a cool detail. And I remember seeing I think the top one over here was actually covered by Winnipeg Railfan many years ago, where one of these engines originally ran for, no, it was the EJ&E down here. It was one of 6 that were purchased by this railroad, and then they ended up on a short line where for some reason they somehow got the face of Thomas the Tank Engine on the short hood. Not really sure what happened to that engine ever since, because that video came out like 7-ish years ago, but that was actually my introduction to the SD38 specifically. But I'm not sure why Lionel had those 2 anniversary liveries back there instead of somewhere over here with the rest of the SD38s, but maybe we'll get more SD38s, maybe we'll move on to another model. They look pretty good, nevertheless. Once again, good job on Lionel for paying attention to detail with the differences between the SD38 mold versus the SD40-2 mold. Just like that, we have another SD38, this time representing the Grand Trunk, with a bunch of Grand Trunk boxcars and some auto parts. Detroit assembly line set. As one would expect, auto parts and cars were one of the primary exports of the Grand Trunk Western, especially during the time when this engine was made in the 70s and 80s. And interestingly, this looks like a patch job over, I believe, the former DT&I units, if I remember correctly. So it's not too often that you see a lot of patched over engines like this in O gauge, let alone with a set. I think Lionel might have done one or two within the past few years, but I don't think for an SD38. So good job once again. We also got the double door boxcars down here, which I think are, oh no, they're listed at 60 feet. I've yet to see an 80-foot O-scale boxcar for auto parts because they're not as common, but I remember a friend of mine bringing up, or at least asking me to look for any 80-foot boxcars for him. So that's why I initially thought of 80. But yeah, these looks like some pretty good boxcars as well. Can't really tell what that last railroad is back there, but hopefully it's in the Greater Detroit region. We have some more boxcars for Pennsylvania, Santa Fe, Southern B&O, and CNW. Pretty nice. Union Pacific, Sentinel, Pacemaker looks pretty nice. Same thing with Pennsy. And then we have a patch caboose, D&H for a former Reading caboose. I think this had to do with D&H giving up or acquiring some trackage from Conrail. And I guess with respect to that, they might have also got some equipment, including this Reading caboose. I wasn't aware of that. Pretty cool. Just like that, we're apparently already halfway through the catalog, according to the page counter up here. That's pretty crazy. We're not even 20 minutes in. Wow, we're going by pretty quickly. So, good catalog overall. Kind of short, but it's volume 2. It's usually the shorter of the two. We got some more freight cars over here. Some hoppers. This is a cool design. Detroit, Toledo, and Short Line. Detroit and Toledo Short Line. I'm not sure if they had a 2-bay covered hopper like this. Maybe they did, and I'm just not aware of it because I'm not aware of the railroad, but it's definitely something that I'll look into. Part of me wonders if it's a Grand Trunk subsidiary, given the logo and how it looks very similar to the earlier version of the Grand Trunk with the square that's slightly rotated. Now we're moving on to some Lionchief engines with the NW2, including some very nice liveries for the Santa Fe, Conrail, Southern, Sioux, and Southern Pacific. I must say, for Lionchief Plus engines, these are very well detailed. They do a good job with the rivets, and they do a great job integrating the paint into the relatively small car body, especially with Southern Pacific down here. And seeing that this is celebrating Lionel's anniversary, it's more than fitting to do the Santa Fe NW2 over here. That's a good thing about Lionel as well, with models like this. I've noticed it more so for Legacy, not so much for O Gauge or for Lionchief, but when needed, they will make slight modifications to the engine to make it more accurate to either what it had in real life or, in this case, an earlier version of post-war. With the most notable difference on the Santa Fe switcher over here being this little radiator towards the short hood, which is not present on the other switchers, because the post-war versions of this model had this little detail. So it is very cool of Lionel to include small details like that on a Lionchief engine. Southern looks pretty nice as well with the lettering. Sioux, I don't really think I've seen a lot of, one, models of this kind of engine, and two, a lot of photos of Sioux Line NW2s. So good job on Lionel for covering this engine as well. And after that, we have the 250 America Special with, I don't know if that's a new mold for the 440 or not. Maybe they're reusing an old one, but I want to say it's a new model because those driver wheels look kind of small when compared to the boiler, which I want to say is not too inaccurate from real life, depending on the model, because as time progressed, I think the driver wheels did become much smaller when compared to your typical American 440. So maybe this represents that latter half-ish of 440 designs before moving on to 260s and then 280s. But this is a pretty interesting design, especially this tanker, or whatever this is supposed to be, as the second car in the consist, and then followed by a bobber caboose instead of the more standard design. So very interesting to see a wooden box car, a flat car, and a metal box car in the middle, all to celebrate America's 250th anniversary. And what a better engine to celebrate that than with one of America's most iconic steam engines in a very believable livery for the time. They do a good job with the two-tone gray on the boiler, the red cab, and even the tender. So they do a good job of making it look like you could take it apart from this set, put it with other 440s, and you wouldn't really tell that this is a bicentennial unit or 250th unit in this case. Sorry if I keep saying bicentennial, but the point is they did a good job still representing the 250th birthday of America and still making it look very realistic. Like it's not part of a theme train. It's not painted in like bright red and green because it's part of some sort of Christmas set that only works on a Christmas layout in a way. They do a good job with the realism on this, especially with the golden trucks on that tender too. That's a nice touch as well. And then we have the CSX 250 America set as well. This was an actual livery. I forget what it is offhand. I think it was to promote, here it is, George H.W. Bush presidential campaign train. Now, I've heard some people say that this is technically the earliest version of YN2 because the background behind the flag is blue, and that goes directly into the yellow. I mean, I'm not entirely sure if I would agree with that, but it's a very interesting take, especially seeing that this was done in 91, 92, whereas YN3, rather, was done in about 2002 to 2006, if I remember correctly. But other than that, it's nice to see that someone finally made a model of this engine. It's not too popular amongst the rail fanning community, so once again, good job to Lionel for highlighting this engine. And it looks like we have some custom freight cars behind it, namely with an auto rack tanker and a box car. Still with the CSX logo on the remote. Again, Lionel did a good job with this set where, unlike something like a Christmas train or a Halloween train, where the locomotive itself is themed for that special holiday, the engine they use could theoretically be used for anything, really. It could be used for any occasion in any set, and it could still fit in perfectly well because it looks realistic while still paying homage to the thing it's celebrating, in this case, American history. After that, we have some more 250th anniversary stuff, including this very nice looking 440 over here, which I think is the same tooling from the set we saw earlier, as well as some respective. We have two different types of coaches down here. Very well done with the detail and the liveries on the side of the coaches. Same can also be said about this 60-foot long legacy boxcar, as well as these two cabooses down here. I'm not sure if, who's this? Again, it's late in the morning, and I also just got back from some technical difficulties with the screen recorder, but I'm not sure if this was the Seaboard Airline caboose or the, the Burlington Northern bicentennial livery. But it looks good on a car body like this. This is a nice original design up here too, especially with the shade of blue. And after that, we have some notable Americans, including Jimmy Carter, and Rosalind Carter, along with some more Army boxcars. Next, we have some more general lionchief locomotives. I guess we're continuing with the Dash 9 series. We have the Spirit of America CSX engine by itself, along with a Canadian National Dash 8 in that case. Sorry, not Dash 9s. So nice to see Lionel representing, I guess, a not as common variant of GE locomotives nowadays. And of course, you have your classic Santa Fe and Conrail Dash 8s in here. Very nice that they made models of them. Then we also have some more 440s over here. I guess they're using a new tooling for these engines. Looks pretty nice. In this case, including the William Mason, which I'm not sure if that shade of green is too light when compared to the real life thing, or if that's just a rendering error. Same thing can also be said for the William Crooks and the Northern Central York. I think this one down here is currently running on the Heritage Railway in York, Pennsylvania. But good models overall. Nice to see that Lionel is still representing realism, or at least basing all their liveries off of real trains, especially with the 440s and the dash 8s over here. The Conrail one looks especially nice, and it's kind of iconic in itself. All right, we got the Phantom for Star Wars, Return of the Phantom. This is a tooling that I haven't seen in years, since the early 2010s at least. But this was a somewhat iconic Lionel design of like the late 90s, early 2000s. I remember seeing this in a more recent-ish, by recent I also mean like early 2010s or late 2000s, but a recent-ish episode of I Love Toy Trains. And just the design of this engine, this concept engine, makes it stand out from anything else that Lionel has to offer. And what a fitting way to include it in a series as futuristic and sci-fi as Star Wars. We also have some nice boxcars over here, especially for R2-D2. So we also have one for Darth Vader and one for, I guess, the light side. I'm sorry, I'm not that big of a Star Wars fan, and so I don't know all the details, but I definitely like the contrast vibe that they have going on here. This kind of reminds me of with all the white and blue, it kind of reminds me of I forget the place, but it's where Star Wars 5 takes place, namely where Lando is from, the city on top of the clouds. I do know that place because I did play Angry Birds Star Wars, and that was one of the primary worlds that they had. But besides the point, great attention to detail, especially with the fuel tank for the Phantom over here and how it represents the different buttons on Darth Vader's suit, in a way, or uniform. So great job with attention to detail once again. It's nice to see the Phantom is returning for this Volume 2 catalog. And after that, we have the fake telephone pole disguised as a tree, a very nice 125th anniversary boxcar, and a very well detailed Halloween engine. And just like that, we're already at the end of the catalog. Definitely one of the shorter catalogs overall. Again, I kind of expect that with Volume 2, but this one was really short for one reason or another. But the ones that they did include, they made them count. Like, there weren't any models that I felt were questionable in a way or could have brought up too much debate. And for the few that they did involve, especially with the Dash 8s over here, they chose great liveries to represent them. So Lionel did a great job, as always. Seeing that there's not a lot of stuff to choose from between Lionchief and Legacy, I'm just going to go with favorite diesel and favorite steam. So I think my options are going to be kind of limited with favorite steam because I think there's only one steam engine class that shows up in the whole thing. So favorite steam, I'm going to go with the 250th America steam engine. It's a great combination of colors and it still looks very real. And because of the gray boiler, I want to say it also indirectly represents like the next stage of 440s after Promontory Summit, where the boiler starts and the driver wheel starts to get a little bit smaller as they start to get phased out in favor of 260s. And then favorite diesel, aka having to choose from literally everything else in the catalog, it's going to be quite a tough decision for this one. I don't know why the SC38s aren't loading, but I'm torn between the F units and, you know what? Because we're splitting the line on Legacy, just to add a little bit more to the vote, I guess, favorite Legacy in the catalog is going to go to the New Haven F units because I was talking about that livery with a friend of mine the other day, and it's a lesser known scheme. So it's a great way to pay homage to Lionel's post-war history. I'm going to choose that over the Santa Fe because as iconic as the Santa Fe livery is, it's something that's been included in almost every single Lionel catalog with different molds and different models over the years. It's iconic, but it's not really unique to the post-war era. It can be found in other eras. I also just noticed a 25 in the number boards. That's a nice little homage to 125th. Whereas the New Haven units over here, that's a lesser used livery, not seen as common, but still screams post-war in a way. So that's favorite legacy, and favorite Lion Chief is going to go to the Conrail-8 down here. I'm from the Northeast. I remember a bunch of Northeast Rail fans are going nuts whenever a CSX-8 would be on a train because I think all the CSX-8s were inherited from Conrail. So these are kind of local legends from where I'm from as well. So once again, good catalog. Not surprisingly, not a lot. Not really sure why they didn't include it in the catalog format, but with what little they had, they definitely made good use of the short amount of space that they had. So once again, thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for a lot more in-depth videos now that the catalog review is complete. So I'm not sure what I'll be working on first, but I do have a lot of things in mind, so stay tuned for all that stuff and more. Have a good day.